and welcome back to In Focus right here on ABC 10. My guest today, special guest today, U.S. Senator Gary Peters, and we're going to continue our conversation here. Talk about a little about the UP and a couple of things that you've been kind of working on. One thing I've read about earlier this week, icebreaker, another icebreaker possibly for the Great Lakes in the region. These things are not cheap from what I understand.
Yeah.
They range between $900 million to $1 billion, and that seems like a lot of money for a machine, but these things are critical to the economy and business. Can you talk about that a little bit and where that stands?
Yeah, well, and some of those costs are kind of the overall budget for a Coast Guard, so hopefully we can get more in with some of that as well. But there's no question it's a very expensive capital investment. But you have to look at it in terms of what we lose if we don't have ice-breaking capacity. And certainly the last two seasons, we've seen incredible cold.
Yeah, it's been brutal.
It's been brutal. Let's put it. Be frank and honest.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the lakes have almost completely frozen over, which we're not used to, and that puts a real strain on the ability for commerce that moves across the Great Lakes and the mines here in the UP and other places. And in fact, the last two seasons, hundreds of millions of dollars of lost revenue to the economy as a result of that ice. So the Coast Guard currently has 9 vessels with ice-breaking capability. Some of those were built back in the 1970s, so they're very old. And our new, I should say new, it's 10 years old, or nearly 10 years, the Mackinac, which is a heavy-duty icebreaker. We only have one of those in the Great Lakes. So we really need more, particularly with the ice coverage. So I'm working to get that in the budget. Again, it takes a while to get that approved, and it takes 2 or 3 years to actually build the ship. So we've got to start now because we're going to retire other icebreakers, but we need the capacity. This ice is also very thick when you have the kind of cold winters, and some folks are saying this, I hope this is not the case, but some of them are saying this might be more of a norm, that we're going through a period of cold. If that's the case, we definitely need to have this icebreaker. We need to start building that now.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, when it's not unseasonably, 20, 30 below. I'll believe it when I see it. I don't mind the zeros, but once it gets below, it gets brutal around here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of shipping the Great Lakes, the Soo Locks. We all know about the Soo Locks. We all know how tight things are there and how critical that is as well to business and economics. And also some repairs are going to be needed and made to the locks here in the next couple of years. And again, you've been working on that as well.
Yeah, so we've been talking about that for a long time, unfortunately, and time is now.
Right.
Especially we've got a lock that's been shut down now, secondary lock, which has had some impacts, a smaller one. So if the big, large lock is shut down, which is the one that accommodates the big freighters, it would be catastrophic. There would be hundreds of millions of dollars that would be costs associated with that. There's also some concerns that some of the maintenance that we need to do on that lock can't be done at the winter time. It's going to have to be done in the summer. So if that's the case, that's going to have a financial impact. So it's very important that we build that. And certainly the Army Corps of Engineers have done some studies related to the economic impact. There's going to be a new one coming out, which I think will show even more stark terms why it's so important that we to have this project. And it's important, as I'm selling this in Congress, I've got to sell it to folks from 49 other states, that this is not a Michigan project. This is for the whole country. The product that comes through the Soo Locks and goes down to the steel mills and other operations down in southern Michigan and around the Great Lakes and other states, that's about fueling the whole economy of the United States.
Yeah.
And this is a critical infrastructure project that benefits everybody, and it will hurt everybody if we don't make that investment.
Yeah, sometimes you just think about it with all the technological advances, that some things you still have to transport through water, even in today.
Right. Right.
Another big thing up here in the last couple of years has been the electricity issues up here. We all know that the EPA has its standards that certain coal plants and stuff are going to have to move past here in the next couple of years. And a lot of people up here are really concerned about what's going to happen up here because, electricity prices right now, people, I believe, they're high, and they're just concerned about them going even higher with when we change, to whatever is going to be changed. And there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of maybe propane, or we get, especially up here in the UP, we get our electricity from maybe Wisconsin, or I've even read something, maybe we run a line across from below the bridge to above the bridge somehow. But electricity-wise, what do you think that we have to do here to be able to keep not only the consumers' bills where they're at, but just to make sure that it's going to sustain for not just 5, 10 years, but for 25, 30, 35 years?
No, I think it's an incredibly important question because we talked about the economy of the UP. Part of that is having the power infrastructure to have power, and you can't price it out of the ballpark for what the competitors are other regions. So otherwise, it's going to be difficult to attract more jobs into the UP. So we have to diversify some of that power source. Some of these plants are going to be going down. Some of them are old. But there are other opportunities. You mentioned some of them. Biofuel is another area.
Right.
And we can, certainly we have a lot of forest products here and can use some of that biofuel to generate electricity. Plus, as you mentioned, hooking into different aspects of the grid. So there are a lot of opportunities. We have to start building that now. It takes a few years to make that happen. But in the meantime, and I'm committed, and I've worked to keep the power rates where they are now, not seeing increases for as long as we can while we engage and build these other power sources. But that's definitely something that the federal government needs to be actively involved in, and I plan to be very involved in.
Speaking of the federal government, big issue up here has been the construction or lack of construction of County Road 595 from as far as County Road AAA to US 41 Connect for the mines. It's been an ongoing process, and right now, most recently, a group has, as far as they're suing the EPA. Just briefly, just talk about, do you think there should be a road that goes through there, and the EPA, do you think maybe they overextended their boundary a little bit?
Well, I'm concerned about it. I'm digging into that now. This is a newer issue for me. I've just been on the ground here the first 6 months here, and that's why I'm up in the UP. I've heard an awful lot about that, and I think it's important. You got to find the right balance. I'm so all about protecting the environment. That's very important. But on the other hand, you have to also be able to move economic activity forward. And in the case of this road, there's also a situation where you have a lot of heavy trucks on city streets.
Yeah.
And if I'm a resident, I'm not going to be real happy about that. So I can certainly understand why people are concerned. And this looks like this is an opportunity to address that issue. But we've got to find the right balance. But it's certainly one that I'm looking forward to engaging in, because I think it's important. And I can tell you I've been hearing an awful lot about it while I've been up here.
All right, then we'll be back with Senator Peters right here with more on In Focus on ABC 10.